Beautiful. Thank you. I want you to turn to Matthew chapter 4. Thank you for letting me be with you. Man, I enjoy your weather. Yeah. Oh, well, it's better in Michigan. We're looking at Matthew chapter 4, verse 1, and we're going to have to preach extra long tonight just to try to make up and catch you into, there's so much material here and not a chance of covering it all. But we're going to zero in on verse 3. And thank you for those who came at the noon hour. We had such a great time and just enjoyed fellowship and discussion together, which was setting something of the stage for this as well. But the verse 4, chapter 4, verse 1 through 11, of course, is the whole temptation scene. And as you look at it, it's recorded, I think, in 3 of the Gospels it's given to us. And Matthew gives along with Luke, gives the most details of the whole thing. And here's what it says. Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And when he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, afterwards he was hungry. Now when the tempter came to him, he said, "If you are the Son of God, command that these stones become bread." Reading verse 3 again. Now when the tempter came to him, he said, "If you are the Son of God, command that these stones become bread." Jesus, bathe us in your presence. Leap out of your word tonight. Save us, O God, from the stupidity of our own thought process. And give us the reality of what you want to say to us. We're open to you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. We mentioned in the Bible study at noon that the word "then" starts the whole passage. And of course it's the Greek word "tote," which ties you back and brings you into a sequence of events. And the word actually means "after that." So this whole temptation event took place after that. And of course you immediately say, "After what?" And it takes you back to the end of chapter 3, which of course is the filling of the Holy Spirit in the heart and life of Jesus. Jesus has been in Galilee all this time, which was way north. And as he's been living there for some 30 years now, taking care of his mom, probably living at home. He was the eldest son, so that was his responsibility. He was doing the carpenter thing. Joseph obviously had died sometime when maybe Jesus was a teenager. We don't know for sure. So here's this whole scene. He's kind of maintaining the whole thing, keeping the family going, overseeing things. He comes home one day and says, "Mom, hey, I'm packing my bags, taking the pictures off the wall. I'm leaving. Nothing will be the same as it has been. I'll never be back quite like I am now. I've called one of the boys, put some money in the bank for you, finished the last contracting job. They'll take care of you, and I'm going down to John, and a new thing is going to take place in my life." So he's entered into this ministry thing. And as he came to John, of course, he is baptized. And the startling news is that the Father, through the Spirit, fills the man called Jesus. It's interesting that all 4 Gospels, folks, all 4 Gospels give this account. All 4 of them. And they all give it at the beginning of the Gospel, saying to you and to me, we've got to look at what Jesus is doing and on the rest of the explanation of the Gospels. We've got to look at it through the eyes of a man who's filled with the Spirit of God. If you want to know what a guy filled with the Spirit of God looks like, looks like Jesus. If you want to know the attitude a guy has when he's full of the Spirit, look, he has the attitude of Jesus. If you want to know how a fella handles himself when he's full of the Spirit, handles himself like Jesus. If it's in Jesus, I want it. If it isn't in Jesus, leave it out, man. I don't want anything to do with it. Everything has to do with Jesus. He's the prototype of what a guy is who is filled with the Spirit. He's the first one, friend, the first one. What's a prototype? You make the first one to see if it works. Whoa, did it work? Wow, did it work? And here's a man filled with the Spirit of God who's totally sourced by God, who is living out of the life of God, who is actually living in the flow of God, who isn't operating out of his own mind, who has the mind of God, who isn't operating out of his own emotional structure, who's literally filled in his emotional structure with the very essence of the presence of God, and God is directing, who isn't disciplining himself to please God, who is now under the discipline of the Spirit of God. Fruits of the Spirit. Know what the last one is? Self-control. Not self-controlling, self being controlled by the Spirit. So this is not about me and I and what I'm going to do and what I'm developing and I will and I won't. This is all about Him and what He's doing and what He wants to accomplish and where He's going and His source and His life and what He's producing. This is about a man who's filled with the Spirit of God and is literally being sourced by that Spirit. So everything that's going to come out of the life of Jesus is intimately connected with the Father. It's phenomenal. Can you imagine the experience? Wow. The Father through the Spirit fills the man called Jesus. And it's that moment the skies part, and the Father screams out, "Woo! I love that boy." I love that boy. And the warmth of all of that, and the closeness of all of that, hey, you could live a lifetime if you knew that the Father loved you. If you knew the intimacy, if you knew the embrace, if you knew the oneness with the Father, if you knew what it was to be filled with the Father, if you lived in if you were absolutely tuned to the Father, if your life was somehow aligned and meshed with the Father, if somehow you were welded with the Father, if somehow you were convinced of the overwhelming intimacy and love of the Father. Then, after that, first event that takes place in his life, what is it? The Spirit led him up. He was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. First event of the Spirit-filled life was temptation. Isn't that interesting? He was led up by the Spirit. Very strong. We talked about it in the Bible study. Very strong because it literally means carried. There are some Bible scholars who say that where this event of temptation took place was the Jordan River's down here, and here's where Jesus would have been baptized. And straight up, there would have been a cliff, and straight up, it would have been 12 to 1,500 feet straight up. And the only way Jesus could have gotten there is that the Spirit picked him up and carried him. I don't know if that's true or not. If you buy that, I'm with you. If you don't, I'm with you too. So it doesn't matter. See, don't get off on that stuff. That doesn't matter. But the emphasis of the word is that somehow, he's brought there. The Spirit didn't give him direction and he went there. No. The Spirit didn't tell him how to go there and he did that. The Spirit literally brought him there. He is carried, he is conveyed, he is moved by the Spirit to come to the wilderness for the temptation's sake. Who's responsible for this? Well, it's the Spirit. So everything that's going to happen in this passage is under the direction of the Spirit of God Himself. Interesting. Right to a wilderness, bugs and heat and cold at night. And not a drop to drink. You come to verse 2. And when he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights. Now, you understand that what he's telling us, and especially as you get into the other accounts of the gospel about this, you begin to discover that Jesus didn't go on a fast. In other words, this was not Jesus saying, "Oh, now that I've been filled with the Spirit, I better go fast and become really intimate with God." This was not an on-purpose kind of fast. This was spiritual warfare. This was a battle so fierce that food is forgotten. This is a nose-to-nose, eyeball to eyeball, fist to fist. This is down to it. This is life-threatening. This is the devil. You realize the devil is not omnipresent. He doesn't have the attributes of God. He's a created being. So you realize the devil, not being omnipresent, has probably never really worked on you. Probably demons, other things, but hey, the actual person of the devil. I believe there is one. I think Jesus believed that too. So the devil actually took over on this one, I think. I believe with all my heart that what the devil says, "Hey, this is too important. I'm not turning this over to any demon. I'm going to handle this myself." So the devil showed up, and there's a battle, a war that's taking place. It's a battle for 40 days and 40 nights to the point that food is forgotten. Now, the temptation didn't take place after the 40 days and 40 nights. No, this was 40 days and 40 nights of spiritual war and temptation. Can you imagine that? 40 days and 40 nights, battling, struggling, all the spiritual warfare, the emotional and spiritual trauma of all of that. And in the midst of all of that, they came to the end of the 40 days, and you can see Jesus kind of leaning against a rock, panting for breath. And you can see the devil crouching down there, covered with dust and bruises. And they look at each other and say, let's take a break. And in that lull, the body of Jesus began to scream out, protein! Can you hear it? He hasn't eaten for 40 days, and it says he was hungry. You look at that and say, that's good spiritual insight, isn't it? He hasn't eaten for 40 days and 40 nights, and the boy is hungry. Well, sure he would be. And his body is literally screaming out with everything it has. The body drives are at their height at this point, screaming out with everything he's got. The devil sees his chance. He hasn't won for 40 days and 40 nights. He hasn't gained an inch. He's going to make 3 last-ditch attempts. Down to it. Here's the first one. He says, if you are the Son of God. Son of God, interesting statement. There's a parallel statement, you realize, Son of Man. Son of God, Son of Man. Obviously, as you get into those phrases, you realize that the Son of God is a focus on his divinity. Son of Man is a focus on his humanity. It's interesting to study those phrases and see where they show up, how often they show up, what they refer to, actually. For instance, Son of God shows up 26 times in the Gospels. 26 times in the Gospels, Jesus is called Son of God. We don't have time, well, I do, but you don't. We don't have time to go through all 26 of them. But in Matthew, 9 times they show up. Those references are really significant. Who is it in the Gospel of Matthew, in the 9 times, that calls him Son of God? Well, 2 of them are right here in our passage. Obviously, verse 3, the devil is saying, if you are the Son of God. Then he turns around and says it again if you go to verse 6. If you are the Son of God. So he suggested it twice. The devil himself has suggested it twice. If you go into Matthew chapter 8, you will find that he is again called the Son of God. For instance, in chapter 8, if you go down to verse 19, it's in chapter 8, verse 19. There's this debate going on. Some are interested in following him. And as you go down into that passage, you begin to discover that, well, that's not the passage. It's the place where Jesus gets off course. The storm comes, and they end up in the land of Gergesenes. And when they land there, this is a whole group of people who are raising pigs. And he is encountered by the man who literally is, by 2 men who are filled with the demons. And I say, these 2 men, the demons have filled these men. They are crying out at Jesus and saying, what have you to do with us, you Son of God? Interesting passage. What have you to do with us, you Son of God? Sideline. The demons turn to Jesus and say, what have you to do with us, you Son of God? Are you here to torment us before the time? What do they mean by that? The demons were saying, hey, we understand. We've heard the rumors. Come on, the spiritual rumors that have been flowing around. We've heard all of those rumors. We know what you do to demons. We know that you cast them out. Hey, are you here to torment us before the time? Meaning, are you here to send us to hell? You can't do that. It's not time for judgment. We know who you are, you Son of God. We understand who you are. But this isn't judgment time. You can't cast us into hell. This is not time for that. You can't. What are you going to do with us? And then the whole issue of the pigs came up. There was a herd of 2,000 pigs. And the pigs was suggested. How about us going into the pigs? And interesting enough, Jesus said, help yourself, and in they went. And isn't it interesting? Pigs couldn't tolerate what people will put up with. And the pigs took off and drowned themselves because they couldn't tolerate that. Interesting. Son of God. So, 2 times, the devils called him the Son of God. Now you've got demons calling him the Son of God. If you go into the chapter 16, you will discover that Peter, in his great confession, Jesus says, who do you think that I am? And Peter said, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God. It's the 4th time. The 4 or 5 remaining times are clustered around, 4 times are clustered around the cross itself, the crucifixion. For instance, the centurion looks at him and says, in his death, and says, truly this was the Son of God. Oh, one other place the disciples called him the Son of God. It was the time when the storm came and Jesus calmed the storm, spoke and calmed the storm, and they fell at his feet and said, truly you are the Son of God. So you got the devil calls him the Son of God, demons call him the Son of God, disciples call him the Son of God, centurion calls him the Son of God. Isn't it interesting that on all of those occasions, Jesus never ever calls himself that? Son of God. Focus on his divinity. Son of man. How many times is that used? 69 times. In Matthew, Mark, and Luke. 13 times in John. 82 times in the Gospels, Jesus is referred to as the Son of God. Get this. 82 times. 79 of those times, Jesus is using that phrase for himself. Only 3 times in the whole Gospel out of the 82 does someone else call him the Son of Man, and he always refers to himself. Never called himself the Son of God. 79 times called himself Son of Man. What would you say was Jesus' favorite reference to himself? Son of Man. Wow. It's interesting that Jesus uses the Son of Man phrase as a pronoun. You know how you use a pronoun? It takes the place of a proper noun. Pronouns are he, she, it, they, so forth. Jesus used Son of Man as a pronoun. For instance, they were following him, and crowds were getting all stirred up about his miracles. And this is in chapter 8 of Matthew. And one man comes up and says, I'll follow you, but first let me go bury my father. And Jesus blew him off on that and said, hey, let the dead bury the dead. Come on, be serious, man. Another guy came, a scribe, and said, I'd like to follow you. I'll certainly follow you. And Jesus turned to him and said, foxes have holes, birds of the air have nests. Son of Man. What's he talking about? Himself. It's used as a pronoun. Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. He did that all the time. Instead of saying, I have nowhere, he said, Son of Man. It was the reference for himself. Why would he do that? Well, the undercurrent of all of that is that he is saying, this is no fake. This is who I am. I am not play acting. This is not fulfilling a role. Saturday night, local bar. It's dark. Smoke-filled room. Guys are drunk. One guy goes up to the bar, orders another beer. When he gets his beer, he turns around, bumps into another guy. That guy's drunk. He turns, hits this guy. That guy hits that guy. This friend hits that guy. And it's a barroom brawl. Out of the shadows comes Walker, Texas Ranger. I'm still mad they took that off. Walker, Texas Ranger. Well, he's not a Texas Ranger. That's Chuck Norris. Come on. He's play acting. That's not Jesus. This is not a play acting. This is I who I am, Son of Man. Focus on his humanity. Son of Man. Used as a pronoun. It's used to state his persuasion. It's interesting that Jesus begins to pick up on this phrase, and he's constantly using this phrase to refer to himself in relationship to why he is here and what he is all about. And of course, why he is here and what he is all about seems to all be relating to the idea of crucifixion. Death. He came to redeem us. Came to die. For instance, Mount of Transfiguration. They're coming out of that scene, coming down the mountain, going to the valley, where the other 12 disciples are. As Jesus is discussing with the 3 disciples that were with him, this is, by the way, where we get our passage when we want to preach against television, because it distinctly says you're not to watch TV. Well, sure it does. So as they're coming down the mountain, Jesus turns to the disciples and says, you got to have the King James Version for this. He turns to him and says, television to no man. Basically what he was saying is, hey, you guys are so confused about what's going on here. You have no clue, so don't preach on this. Don't make up. I can imagine the kind of sermons you'll get up on that vision. See, you saw Moses and Elijah and Transfiguration. Hey, keep still. Don't even talk about it. Don't tell anybody about it, because you don't know what you're talking about. So he said, television to no man. And they said, you're right. We are a little confused on the whole thing. They turned to him and said, we know that you're the Messiah. We believe that with all our heart. But we know that you can't do your thing until this Elijah guy comes and does his thing, because he's the forerunner. So we got the idea that you're here, you're just kind of treading water, just kind of biding time. Yeah, you're messing with some poor folks and feeding some hungry people and, doing a few miracles here and there. And all that's nice, and we're glad to have that. But the real thing you came to do was to march down to Rome, kick Caesar off the throne, drag that throne down here and set up a kingdom. The real thing you came to do, you're not doing, because the Elijah guy hadn't showed up. When's he going to come? Jesus turned to him and said, you're right. Elijah guy does have to come first. But he's already come. And they did not know him, but did to him whatever they wished. Likewise, the Son of Man will suffer at their hands. Jesus gave 3 predictions of his death and resurrection. The last 2 make a distinct reference to the Son of Man. See, he tied this whole thing of the destiny of what he is as the Son of Man to the cross, his death. Son of Man. Son of God. Now, take all of that. Come to our passage. This is phenomenal. Look at verse 3. The devil comes along and says, if you are the Son of God, command that these stones become bread. Now, a lot hangs on the word if. It's the Greek word a, spelled E-I. And it is a conditional clause. Used that way all the time. Meaning what? If this is true, if this condition takes place, then this should take place. In other words, if you mow the yard, I'll pay you. If you don't do this, I won't do this. It's a conditional thing. But in this particular case, and also in the case in verse 6, now it's also used down in verse 9. If is down in verse 9, but it's an altogether different deal in verse 9. So in verse 6 and in verse 3, it's really interesting. It's the Greek word a, and it is a conditional, but it has an indicative verb. I can see you're getting excited about this. The indicative verb is a simple statement of fact. And when the a is connected with an indicative verb, often it simply means a statement of a realized truth, which then would make this translation not if, but since. Now look at this passage. The devil says, since you are the Son of God. Hey, come on, Jesus. I know you're the Son of God. You know you're the Son of God. All the demons know you're the Son of God. I mean, there's no question in our mind where you came from, who you are, and what you're all about. Listen, I was there when the angels sang. Hey, I got the message, man. I was the one that started the thing with Herod and tried to kill all the baby boys. Well, I wanted to get rid of you, man. Why? Because you're the Son of God. I know what's going on here. You're not fooling me. I know that you're the one way back. Hey, I was there in the garden, son. I know what was going on. Eve was there, Adam was there. God showed up and said, and turned to Eve and said, the heel of the seed of this woman is going to step on your head, boy. And he says, I've been watching for you all along. You're going to step on my head and you're going to ruin me, and I'm not going to let it go. I'm not going to let it happen. So I know exactly who you are. There isn't any question in my mind. You're the Son of God. Since you're the Son of God, you know what I'd do if I were you? You're in a mess. 40 days, 40 nights, nothing to eat. I know. You were baptized. Father, through the Spirit, came and filled you. Oh, you're a Spirit-filled man. You just came out in the glow of all of that. And the Father said, woo, I love that boy. And you felt so good about the whole thing. Look where all that got you. Starved to death. Brought you to the wilderness, man. Nothing but bugs and wild beasts, Mark says. Here you are. I mean, God the Father, who says, I love you, doesn't even care for the basic necessities of your life. And you want to be sourced by him? Look where letting God take care of you. Look where letting God source you. Look where relying on his power takes you. Look when you give your whole life to him and let him flow through you, and he begins to source you. When you rely on him instead of your own wisdom. When you rely on him instead of your own ability. When you let him discipline you instead of you disciplining yourself. When you literally come under his control and let him flow through you. Look where it gets you, Jesus. Look where it gets you. Starved to death, man. About to die. You can't take much more of this. You know what I would do if I were you? If I were you, you know what I'd do? I would literally reach back and I would grab a hold of my divine powers. I know you gave them up. You emptied yourself. That's what Paul said. You emptied yourself of all that you had as God. All the divine powers. You set them aside and became a man so you could be sourced by God. If I were you, you know what I'd do? I'd reach back and I would reverse the incarnation for just a moment. Wouldn't take long. Come on. I'd source myself. Get myself out of this mess. I would turn that stone into bread. Now, folks, you realize a spirit-sourced man who's sourced by the Spirit of God couldn't do that. I mean, turn stones into bread. Come on, think. See, when you're sourced by God, you can't use the miracle. You can't use the power of God just any way you want to. You can't just turn it on and turn it off. You don't just heal anybody you want to. When you're sourced by God, it's who he wants, what he wants to do, where he's going, what he's all about. You can't just zap stones anytime you want to. Do you think when God comes to live within you, you just handle that power and whoa, and hey, my kid's teeth will be straight now, and hey, shorten my nose too. You think that's the way this works? Being sourced by God doesn't work like that. Why? Because you're under his control, and this power only flows. He only does through. He only accomplishes through you what he desires. So obviously, if God wanted Jesus, God the Father wanted Jesus, the man, to have bread, he would have had it. But he didn't have it. He couldn't use that power for this. How could he turn stones into bread? The only chance he had was to reverse the incarnation. Reach back, grab a hold of the divine power that he gave up, and zap those stones and source himself. And the temptation here is not about bread. The temptation here is not about miracles. The temptation here is what? Are you going to be a spirit-sourced man and let God flow through you to redeem a world? Or are you going to live out of yourself? Produce your own righteousness. Handle your own scene. Live out of your own talent. Make your own way. Whew. I propose to you, ladies and gentlemen, that is the heart of every temptation. Whatever the temptation, whatever the form of the temptation, whatever the circumstances of the temptation, however the temptation goes down, whatever form it comes in, when you crawl down to the heart of it, you will discover the very heartbeat of every single temptation is, am I going to trust Him? Am I going to rely on Him? Am I going to let Him flow through me? Is He going to source me? And am I going to kick my feet out from under me and lean in His arms and say, hey, this is your deal, not my deal? Am I going to cease my trying, my conniving, my conning, my efforts? Am I going to give myself totally to Him for His sourcing in my life? Or am I going to handle it? Am I going to take care of it? Am I going to fix it? That's the heart of every temptation. A friend of mine got converted, and God did marvelous things in his life, called him to preach and whatever, and was really great. Smoking habit. He finally gave smoking up. Why? Bad for your health. Well, that would be a good reason. Eliminate the risk of cancer. That would be a good reason. You're the temple of the Holy Spirit. That would be a good reason. But that wasn't a reason. Finally dawned on him. God said to him one time, said, every time you get under a little pressure, every time things don't go just, you know what you do? You reach for a cigarette. Why don't you turn to me? Why do you source the answer to your problems out of your own? Why would you turn to something that's connected to you instead of, why don't you turn to me? Why don't you let me source your life? It doesn't matter where you go in the realm of sin. The heart of every sin is that. We talked in the Sunday school class. You cannot define a sin by the action of the deed. It isn't the deed, the action of the deed that makes a sin a sin. Well, what makes a deed a sin? Not the action of the deed. What makes any deed a sin is what sources it. Do you realize, ladies and gentlemen, if Jesus doesn't source it, it's a sin. Whether it's preaching, singing, witnessing, church stuff, being on the board, being the Sunday school superintendent, being the treasurer, being whatever, if it isn't sourced by, it's a sin. Come on, you've read those passages, haven't you, in the Old Testament? That your best deed on your best day, the best thing you can pull off at the best hour of your life, still stinks because it's filthy rags. All my righteousness is filthy rags. Why? Because I sourced it. And I was not built to source myself. I was not built to live out of myself. I was not built to be independent. I was built to be dependent upon Him. I was built to be filled with Him. I was built that He might live within me. I wasn't built to fix stuff. I was built to live in His flow. What was the first sin? Oh, you know. It's the apple thing. No. Well, it might have been. I don't know. Devil comes along and says, hey, Eve, eat of the fruit of this tree. No, God said not to. He just told you that for the fun of it. You know why He told you that? He told you that because He knows if you will eat of the fruit of this tree, you will be like God. Oh, You mean all this time I've let God be God? All this time I've been dependent? All this time it's been what God wants, what God wills, what God desires? All this time it's been God's way, God's wants, God's this, God's that. You mean it could have been my way, my will, my... Yeah. So she dethroned God and enthroned herself. It's the heart of every sin. That wasn't done in a wilderness, folks. That was done in a nice garden with plenty to eat. But it's the same thing. See, it doesn't matter where you go in the sin business, you end up back to this one central idea and truth. That the heart of every temptation is about what? It's about, listen, am I going to be His? Am I going to live in His power? Am I going to be filled with Him? Is He going to literally intertwine His being with mine, and we are going to act as a unit, and He's literally going to produce out of me what I can't? Am I going to live beyond my abilities? Am I going to be what I can't be and live like I can't live and love like I can't love? Am I going to be sourced by His power, or am I going to live out of myself? The heart of every temptation. Well, I'll tell you, preacher, I've got my rights. Oh, come on. What are you talking about? I've got my rights. Well, help yourself. You just stepped into sin. Well, I got a right to speak my piece. No, you don't. What are you talking about? Well, I have a right to my opinion. No, you don't. Listen, I earned it. I have a right to spend it. No, you don't. Oh. Well, I got a right to go where I want to go. No. What's my life? No, it's not. What are we talking about here? No, it's not. Well, I went to college and I got the degree and I have a... No, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't. Well, hand me the phone. I'll tell her a thing or two. Don't do that. Don't do that. Well, I'll fix it. No. Well, listen, I've done my best. Oh, please don't do your best. We've seen your best, and it's awful. Well, we're doing the best we can, preacher. Whoa. Maybe that's the reason we're in the mess we're in, because we're doing our best. See, we were never built to do our best. We were never to live out of ourselves. We were never built to source our own lives. We were built for this connection, this linkage, this filling, that everything that happened to Jesus in the chapter 3, the Father through the Spirit filling the man called Jesus and beginning to produce a Spirit-sourced man. That's you. That's what He trained. Well, how are you going to end this service, preacher? Well, altar call. Well, I'm not going to that altar. Why not? Well, my wife will think I'm saying she's right. I'm not going to do that. Whoa. Well, I've got a reputation. Whoa. After all I've testified about. Whoa. See where we are? Well, I don't do the altar thing. Whoa. Why not? Well, it's just not my personality. Since when has this been about your personality? See, the whole design of the altar, folks, is that I break with myself and take sides with God and say, hey. And you may say tonight, I'm the best person who's ever lived. But Folks, wow. That's the height of sin. So this is not about street stuff. This is about, you wouldn't sit there tonight and look me in the eye and tell me that there isn't a possibility that there's some area of your life that you source yourself. Could we surrender that? Could we break with ourselves? Could we break with our rights?